Hi, welcome to the Divine Insight Show. Thank you so much for joining me wherever and whenever you're doing so. I'm thrilled to be with you today and have an exciting guest who I'm going to introduce here today to talk about how to say goodbye to negativity and say hello to peace. Sounds good, too good to be true, but it is possible. We're going to talk about how to do that today. With me here is Dr. Paul Miller, author, therapist, and meditation teacher who has been working with clients for over 14 years. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Travis. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I'm really appreciative for the work that you do and for joining me today. I'm honored that you can share your wisdom, and we're going to talk about your book here, The Mindful Place of Calm, Find Your Way into the Space Between Thoughts and Actions. And it's a guide really to help readers cultivate deep inner wisdom. So what led you to work in the field of personal growth and specifically meditation and mindfulness?
So it started about 15 years ago. I was in a really stressful place. I just got laid off from my engineering job, and the last year has been really, really stressful. And I thought I need to take a couple of months off to get my stress levels back to normal, which is a bit of a damning statement in this day and age that there's normal stress, isn't there really? So I started to kind of, look at ways to try and get my stress down. I used to work out a bit, but it was only temporary, maybe a few hours after working out. I thought I need something more permanent, something that would endure during the day. So I started looking into meditation and mindfulness, and I found, wow, this really, really works. So I found that being an engineering background, I kind of took a very logical approach to how to meditate. How do I know when I'm doing it right? What's the point of meditating? How can I use it as a tool? So I used all of those questions that you would as an engineer, how, what, when, why, in meditation. And I suddenly found that I had techniques and experiences that I could actually help me to grow. And I thought, wow, this is pretty pragmatic. Maybe other people could benefit from this. So that's how I started.
That's really great. And I really appreciate that. You don't necessarily know about my background as an attorney, an HR person, doing intuitive work can sound, like, wow, those are just so opposing situations. But I think a lot of people can relate to this idea of our pragmatic mind, which is so valuable in so many ways to help us plan our day, to understand what we need to get at the grocery store or how to make food, and things in our lives. But it's sure not great at reducing the anxiety that we might feel about our experience, or as you described, the stress that we might see. And I know that, the science around good stress, that stress can help us perform better, and stress in certain amounts and appropriate amounts can help us, do better and be better and improve and be our best selves. Too much stress can be overwhelming, it can be prohibitive and be harmful for us. So it's great to have this opportunity. And it's why I like to have people like you on the show regularly talking about mindfulness and meditation and present moment awareness, because it's so valuable and it is so helpful. And that's what you mentioned being pragmatic, and with your background, I really appreciated the way that you wrote this book, because it's very specific and very direct. And I think that's incredibly helpful for a lot of people. So thank you for that. But what I was interested and curious about from your perspective is, why do you think it's so helpful that people get into a practice of meditation and mindfulness right now? Like, what is it about mindfulness and meditation that you think is so important, like right now?
I think mindfulness, when I talk to people, there is still a little bit of pushback against the word meditation, because they think you have to chant, sit in a particular pose, or have studied in India. But mindfulness is more accepted in corporate America, because I go into various companies. So it's an accepted buzzword, mindfulness. I see a lot of similarity between the two. And I think it's more accepted now because there's so much stress. Because I live and work in the Bay Area, and anxiety here is absolutely epidemic. It's crazy. I just cannot believe how much people have anxiety. So I think just in this day and age, we're so overwhelmed with what we have to do, that I think stress and anxiety and all the other health issues that come with it, we need something that will help people. And as one of my friends say, it's skills, not pills. And I think if you can help people in a pragmatic, logical way to see that they can meditate in 5 minutes, what it is they're getting out of it. And then I usually do a guided meditation to say, look, this is how you can use it to change something in your life, to actually see a change. And I've had great results in the clinic that I work in like a couple of weeks with people with anxiety. 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at night, that's all you need. And you can see a change in yourself. It's that easy, that fast.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. Thank you. And who is this book for? Did you have a particular audience in mind or a particular type of person that you were looking to help specifically?
That's a really good question. The interesting thing is I'm not, because my background's engineering, so I don't consider myself a writer. So I asked myself a lot of interesting questions. Who am I writing this book for? And I thought I wanted a book that will grow with people. So I wanted something that a beginner could pick up and could go, okay, I can get this much out of it. Then somebody who's been doing it for a little bit could get some of the deeper aspects. And then somebody who has a regular meditative practice who asks themselves the question, okay, I have really good practice, I feel good, but how can I go further in changing my perceptions of myself and the world around me? And I have to bring that in. So I kind of wrote it for those 3 levels, really.
That's wonderful. And so from your experience and from the clients that you've worked with in your practice, what have you found to be some of the major benefits that people who begin a practice or expand a practice are gain from meditation?
They become less triggered by events around them, things that might have irked them or pushed the buttons. They find it's easy to let go. And when you let go, you can look at things from a different perspective and go, yeah, okay, then maybe I'll listen to the other person's point of view rather than argue back at them just because that's how I've always behaved. So people are actually seeing changes. Because for me, meditation isn't about 10 minutes of feeling good. I consider it as the booster shot for how you hold the feeling during the rest of the day. So it's, one of the stories I tell is a lot of people tend to think meditation is like brushing your teeth. In the morning you wake up, you have your breakfast, check, you brush your teeth, check, put your clothes on, check. And they think, oh, meditate for 10 minutes, check, okay, done it, move on, jump back into crazy. I'm like, no, that's your booster shot. The trick is to create what I call the meditative feeling and then train yourself to hold it during the day so you actually live from that place inside yourself, that feeling. It feels really strange to begin with because you're more tolerant, more understanding. And some people are like, oh, this is weird. I'm not used to being this understanding and tolerant. I have to be argumentative. Isn't that standing in my power? And I'm like, no. Standing in your power is when you hold your equanimity inside you. You still find your voice, but you don't have to be in this grumpy energy.
Yeah, that's really great. And, as you were talking, I was thinking about my own experience and, the sort of the side title of the book is Find Your Way into the Space Between Thoughts and Actions. And I think one of the things that I've experienced myself is when you begin to have a practice in your life that allows you to, with awareness and intention, identify the thoughts that you're having, you can realize that you are not your thoughts. You are not necessarily bound to them. You are not necessarily defined by them, nor does it require you to act on them. And I think that was an incredibly powerful message that I got from what you talk about in your book.
Right.
I also really appreciate that you break down the process and you talk about first helping readers create a foundation of awareness through meditation. Can you talk a little bit about why it's important for people to start with awareness?
Because I have a little mantra that I call it awareness, action, change. So what happens is you cannot change something if you are not aware of what it is that's going on and what you need to change. And sometimes a lot of people, when they look at something in their behavior, they're looking kind of at the surface. For example, I always get angry in traffic. So everyone thinks, oh, it's anger is the feeling. Well, no, underneath anger, there is always something else. So if you have your awareness of what is it I'm really feeling under anger, and understand it might be a feeling of helplessness because you might have just missed an accident, or not been in control. When you have that awareness, then you can take action at that level, and that's when change happens. So it's awareness, action, change in that order. You need the awareness to figure things out,
Yeah, thank you. And something else that really resonated me as I was reading your book about your discussion of distorted perceptions. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by distorted perceptions and how people can learn to identify and work with them?
So we are our perceptions. Our perceptions are created when we're growing up, how we perceive the world and ourselves. And I call perceptions distorted because they tend to twist what is actually there. So for example, you and I might observe an event and someone will interview you and say, what did you see? What did you think about it? And that could be very different from my perception. Now, the thing is, okay, here's another simple example. Suppose somebody does something and I'm mortally offended. I think it's rude what the person did. And I ask you and you go like, oh, I didn't think it was any big issue. Why am I offended and you're not? And you go like, well, it's who I am. But you're just equanimity, you let it go, and I'm really feeling it inside me. So wouldn't it be good if I could understand what my perception was that's making me feel this energy inside, so I could be more like you and go like, well, that was a bit rude, but not have all the angst with it. So our perceptions are really key to changing who we want to become and letting go of stress, because stress, bottom line, is perceptual. It sounds really, really hard, but that's what it is. Because just from my own experience in engineering, if I had an issue and there's a problem, I would be like, oh my God, it's going to take me days. I'm going to struggle. I'm going to chase my tail. I'm going to really hate this. I had a friend who had a problem in engineering. He relished the challenge. He thought, oh my God, this is great. Why did we have a different perception? I wish I could have been like him. So our perceptions really control how we perceive the world and ourselves. And if we could change those, and it's not about being a carpet or going back to the 60s or anything. It's about creating more equanimity and understanding and peace within us for ourselves,
Yeah, thank you. And to use your example before of the traffic, I would be one of those people that would get, like I have always talked about in jest somewhat, that I really am good at getting my Zen until you get me behind the wheel of the car.
Right.
And one of the things that I noticed, for those interested in a practical application of something that we might experience in the car, is like, let's say that you're in line to get off the exit and there's traffic and it's delayed. And then there's that person, right, who comes in, and there they are in front of all these other cars that have lined up behind you. And the initial reaction that I might have and have had is that person's a jerk. What are they doing cutting in front of me? I'm in line, they deserve, and all this sort of self-righteousness. But what I've realized is that I don't know what's going on in that car. I don't actually know if that person missed the turn, was, turning from somewhere else. So my reality was that this person might have been doing it on purpose because of me. And It's interesting that that's such a selfish way of perceiving it, and the victim mentality. Whereas if I was able to stop and have this other other acknowledgement of a different way of seeing things, that my reaction, which as you described, is where that stress comes from. It's not the event. The event is rather neutral. A person comes in and people let them in. That's a neutral event. But my reaction is what either causes or can cause stress or not. And you know, you used this term a couple of times in the interview so far, equanimity. Could you describe a little bit more about what you mean by that term and how it applies to this practice of meditation?
So one of the things that I do, because people say, Paul, how do I know when I'm meditating correctly and not just sitting down for 10 minutes having quality time with myself? And I say, when you have the feelings of like peace, calm, and stillness within you. So I call that the meditative feeling, and that's kind of like an equanimity. You know, it's this foundation within you of peace, calm, and stillness. And, you know, when you have that and you let that guide your thoughts and your behavior, then you're more liable to let things go that don't bug you. Like your example, someone cutting in front in the line, like, okay, whatever. So they cut in, you know, the rationalization of you've got no idea what's going in the car, it's not personal, is great. Because you keep the peace within you. You don't allow something outside to knock you out of that space. That's what I think equanimity is.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And I appreciate that you know, further illustration, because I think, you know, in my own life, I've really grown in my personal joy from recognizing often I might take things personally, which is kind of interesting to say, but it was true for me. And it's rather a good practice to, and it wasn't something that sort of happened overnight, but through learning to identify the thoughts I was having and things, that this actually really grew. And I want to talk about some of the exercises that you put together, because I think those are also super helpful. And I mentioned before how thoughtful I felt that your writing style was, with specificity, and and specifically what resonated with me was the importance of tracking progress, you know, and how that actually makes the process more enjoyable. If to use your example earlier, if I use meditation as a checklist to do, okay, done, back to life, it's really about, you know, how do I truly become aware of the things that I've benefited from. Can you describe a bit about some of the tracking mechanisms or exercises that you developed, and share one or two that you yourself found most helpful?
Yes, absolutely. So, let's see, where can I start? So this is part of the pragmatic thing. So I asked myself this question, okay, I'm giving up 10 minutes of my life to meditate every morning. What's the point? How can I see the benefit? So I started to think, okay, so I have this tool that I'm using. I want to see changes. So the first thing I thought about was low-hanging fruit. I want to try and find out something that mildly irritates me and see if the feeling that I'm creating can help change my reaction to that small thing. So, for example, what I say to people is, you know, if somebody cuts you up on the freeway, many of us sometimes like to give advice to the driver on how they can improve their driving, even though they can't hear it. So that's something that you do 10 times a week to work and back from work. So if that's something that you consider mildly irritating compared to, say, where we're going to go for Thanksgiving, your parents or mine, which could be a big thing, then you could say, okay, I'm going to test myself on this. So I have something, I think we've heard of SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So you pick a goal that you're going to test your meditative feeling on. So it has to comply to all of those things: specific, realistic, and then you actually look for the change. Believe it or not, it actually becomes fun, because you're going like, oh, I'm meditating and let's see how I'm going to change. Because I think one of the problems people have is they meditate and they don't know if they're changing or not. And if they don't see change, then they might go, what's the point? And give up and stop. We're human. We need validation. We need to see change. We need to see success. But you have to be careful in picking it. So using the low-hanging fruit, make the fruit a SMART goal, and look for it in your life. Actually look for it. You suddenly find like, hey, I don't need an Xbox. I've got my life to have fun in. I'm going to meditate and see what changes I can have. This is great. And when you see the low-hanging fruit change within a week or two, you're like, oh my goodness, look at this. Isn't this cool? Then you do more low-hanging fruit and you work your way up the tree.
That's wonderful. And so for those who are list oriented and like lists, I always like to have a little piece of paper and a pen out, because there's all kinds of wisdom that can come out, much like you've described. You know, you can identify the low-hanging fruit. What is it that I want to most work on? And I think people, you know, it's okay to tackle the big things in your life, you know, the things that tend to stress you out, for lack of a better term, more than others, because these are messages that our body is telling us that things aren't going in a way that makes us happy. So if we notice these levels of things that we can change, then like you say, you take one at a time. And if it's measurable, I can say, okay, if I want to work on my patience while driving, then maybe I'll get some insights on what that could be like. But I'm also interested in your own journey. Were there any surprises that you had, that you discovered in your own journey in meditation that you'd like to share?
Yes, there was. I think when I very first started, I was very surprised to find that there is an inner knowledge and a wisdom in all of us. So it goes back to the very beginning. How did I give up engineering and start to walk this meditative spiritual path? It wasn't because I was bored and I wanted to do something different. So I was meditating to try and lower my stress. And one morning, between being fully awake and fully asleep, I heard this voice in my head. It was my voice, but not my thought. And it said, go and learn to channel energy. I had no idea what it was talking about. At this point in my life, I didn't believe in anything. When I was doing my PhD, I'd logically argued God out of existence. I didn't believe in spirituality, God. I was a classic geeky engineer. If you couldn't describe it in physics and maths, then it was probably all in your head. So this was quite a shock. And I had no idea. I spoke to my yoga instructor and she said, go to this school in Georgia and they'll teach you to channel energy. And so I went to this place. It wasn't quite that easy. It was in the mountains of Georgia. And remember, I'm English, okay? So I have a very interesting view of what happens in the mountains. I still remember watching Deliverance going like, oh my God, yes, I'm not going anywhere near the mountains. Then when I was walking around my apartment, the thought, should I say, said, go and have an adventure. So I did. And the exercise was about developing your intuition. Now, I know the word. I've never experienced. What's intuition? I've got no idea. That's how geeky it was. I know the word. I know women have it, feminine intuition. And that's about all I knew. So I was quite surprised to find that I was developing it. I was not a star student. I was the bottom of the class, but enough happened during that time to make me wonder, what is the real world? I have experienced and seen things for real here and now in my life. And what is the real world now? You know, is what I saw as the real world is a part of it, but there's so much more. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? So came back, started meditating, and I thought, I have this wonderful feeling, but I want to be a better human being. I can still see myself judging. How do I change my perceptions of myself and the world? And I really, really want to be a better human. And what would happen is, I was teaching scuba diving at the time, and I was just doing stuff around the house. An insight, like a sound bite of knowledge, would come to me from nowhere, absolute nowhere. And I'd write this down and I'd go like, oh my God, where did this come from? I started calling them the Renovatio Sutras, because Renovatio came from Ewan McGregor was in a movie called The Island. And in it, one of the protagonists had a boat called Renovatio, which is Latin for rebirth. And I thought, oh, sutra, yeah, I like Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. Renovatio Sutra was great. So I started collecting these over the years. They would just, I wouldn't think about it. They would just come to me. And I kept thinking, where is this wisdom? Where's this knowledge coming from? And I suddenly realized we all have it. It's there within us. I think one of the greatest surprises in my life was to find that there's another part of me that I had no idea was there. And by meditating and being still and quiet, you can connect to it.
Wow, that's really beautiful. And, I think a lot of people can relate to that type of, experience, particularly around a transformation, about saying, wow, this is really, we can get so locked down in our day to day and living out the things that we have responsibility for, or studying and working and trying to achieve, and all of that stuff is we don't often have, which we ultimately are responsible to create, the opportunity to understand how we fit into the greater purpose of all of humanity. And it's interesting to see you talk about the sort of new spirituality that you didn't have before. It's fascinating, and I really appreciate you sharing that. Is there anything else that you want to share about your book or work that we haven't already talked about?
Yes, let's think. I would say to those people who think they can't meditate, you can. You can do it in 5 minutes. The exercises described in the book. I've taken a lot of the spirituality out of some of the concepts, taken into corporate America and use it as stress relief. People can see change. So I would say to everyone, you can change. It's not as hard as you think. It does take willingness, tenacity, and fortitude, but you can do it. I would say for those of you who have a regular meditative practice, and I get asked this a lot by yoga instructors, they say to me, Paul, I'm meditating, but now what? What do I do? And I say, okay, go in and contemplate, listen to that inner guidance that we all have inside you, and have a yearning to want to know what that knowledge is, how to be better. So from the beginners to the people that regularly meditate, you've got this amazing, amazing space within you to explore and change, and just go for it.
That's great. Thank you. And and it makes me think about times when, people kind of have this myth around meditation is just sitting quietly for 10 minutes.
Right.
And how boring is that?
Mm-hmm.
And how's that going to help me? Like, that's just stupid or silly. Mm-hmm. And I think people that, aren't as practiced can get into this mindset of saying, okay, I'm meditating, which means I'm just sitting quietly for 10 minutes a day. And it's like, no, it's actually, the idea behind is that you bring attention and intention to something for greater awareness.
Right.
It's not just random. It's not super random. Although for the work that I do, when I work with the clients, we might open ourselves up to more of our spiritual nature and get specific insight in something going on in our lives. But that's a topic for another day. So what do you think listeners can do right now? I like to provide sort of one transformational tool that people who are watching or people who are listening might do right now to incorporate into their lives. Can you share something that you think might be helpful for people to do right now to help sort of transform their experience?
Is this for people with a regular practice, or people just starting, or what kind of thing?
Let's just say for people who are interested in exploring the benefits of a meditation or mindfulness practice.
Okay, so what I would say is one of the techniques, very simple, you can do this in 5 minutes, is take your awareness to the skin on the inside of your nose, and as you are breathing in, physically feel the cold air of the room as you're breathing in, and the warm air from your lungs as you're breathing out. If your mind wanders off, don't get frustrated. Think of it as a little puppy or a kitten. Just bring it back. Focus again. What I do is I have my smartphone and I set it for 5 minutes on vibrate. So I don't get any shrill noise when the alarm goes off, just a gentle vibration. When you come out, ask yourself, what am I feeling emotionally? So you're looking for peace and calm. Now, here's a really good point. Ask yourself, what does my mind feel like emotionally? So that's really, because a lot of people will say focused, clear, present. But what it is it's not racing. What they have done in the 5 minutes is to quieten and still their mind. If you have anxiety, and anxiety is a racing mind out of control, you have just nailed your anxiety to the floor, because you won't feel quiet or still with anxiety. So in 5 minutes, then once you have that feeling, get up and do something around the house, and notice how when you interact with it's washing dishes or whatever, how there seems to be this space, this zone of equanimity within you as you're interacting with things. You can do that right now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That's such a helpful experiential practice that people could do right now. So thank you so much. How can listeners or viewers get in touch with you to learn more about your work and get your book, which is due to be released, you said, on November 8th, coming up just in a few days?
So the book is actually available as pre-order on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, Llewellyn, and another place, I can't remember what it is. My website is actually called Tools for Your Life, exactly as it sounds. There's no numbers or any short, Tools for Your Life. And if people sign up to the newsletter, you can get a free download of my voice set to music, guiding you through the nose breathing meditation. So you can actually play and listen to it. So I would say to people, though, who are listening to guided meditations, to consider them as training wheels. You do not want to develop a dependency on, I can only meditate if I'm listening to somebody, because you have to find your own inner strength and fortitude to do it. But it's nice to listen to them, to develop the routine, and maybe, I just feel like listening to someone guiding me. But don't depend on a guided meditation for your technique. Eventually, you have to give up the training wheels and go on your own.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining me today, for your wonderful wisdom and insight and incredible work. I hope the folks get the book, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Travis. It was a pleasure.
You bet.